Welcome to Truth Behind History. The stories are real, the impact is lasting. Let me ask you something. When we think of ancient civilizations, which ones usually take center stage? Rome, Egypt, maybe Greece flexing its philosophical muscles? These iconic empires get all the documentaries, the museum exhibits, and the Hollywood blockbusters. But buried beneath their fame are entire civilizations that have been left out of the spotlight. Civilizations that once shaped economies, influenced culture, and even changed the course of human history, only to be forgotten by most. This video is about dusting off those neglected chapters of our past. We're diving into the lesser-known but no less fascinating civilizations, those that played massive roles in the ancient world but somehow got sidelined in mainstream history. The goal here is to bring their contributions back into the conversation. From the engineers of the Indus Valley to the diplomatic ironmasters of the Hittite Empire, we're going to explore how these societies shaped trade, warfare, technology, and governance in ways you may have never imagined. In this presentation, we'll travel across continents and centuries. We'll explore Carthage and its maritime might, the military prowess of the Hittites, the urban genius of the Indus Valley, and we'll even tip our hat to honorable mentions like the Elamites, the Sogdians, and the Zapotecs. History isn't just about who won or who lasted the longest. It's also about the innovations, ideas, and cultures that left behind echoes we still feel today, even if we've forgotten where they came from. Alright, ready to begin? Let's set sail with one of the greatest maritime powers the world has ever known. Carthage, a city that rose from humble beginnings to become the heavyweight champion of Mediterranean trade, and one of Rome's fiercest rivals. If there was ever a civilization that deserves more than just a few passing mentions, it's this one. Carthage was founded around 814 BCE by the Phoenicians, who were already master sailors and traders in their own right. But Carthage? Carthage took it to a whole new level. Strategically located in what is now Tunisia, it grew rapidly into a commercial empire. Its harbors were bustling with ships loaded with everything from silver to spices to purple dye, yes, the very same dye reserved for royalty. This wasn't just a city, it was the Amazon prime of the ancient Mediterranean. Now, you can't talk about Carthage without talking about the Punic Wars. These weren't your average border skirmishes. These were epic clashes between Carthage and Rome that shaped the future of the Western world. And leading the charge for Carthage, the legendary general Hannibal. This guy marched an army, including war elephants, over the Alps to invade Italy. Let me say that again. Elephants. Over the Alps. That's not just gutsy, that's theatrical. It was one of the boldest military moves in history, and it nearly broke Rome. But Carthage wasn't just about elephants and epic showdowns. Their strategic legacy runs deep. They innovated in naval warfare, building fast, maneuverable ships and developing advanced harbor systems. Their navy was like a well-oiled machine, and their military tactics were sharp, disciplined, and ahead of their time. They even had a political system that balanced power between merchant elites and military leaders. Carthage may have been destroyed by Rome in the end, but don't let the flames of its fall overshadow the brilliance of its rise. Its legacy lived on in trade, technology, and tactics that influenced the ancient world for centuries to come. Now let's head north to Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, where the Hittites were busy rewriting the rules of power, war, and statecraft. If Carthage ruled the seas, the Hittites were the kings of the mountains, forging not just empires, but quite literally, iron. These folks were among the first in history to smelt and use iron for tools and weapons. That's not just a small technological bump, it's the start of the Iron Age, and the Hittites were leading the charge. Iron weapons were stronger, more durable, and deadlier than the bronze weapons everyone else was swinging around. It gave the Hittites a massive edge in warfare, and they knew it. But what really sets the Hittites apart isn't just their metallurgy, it's their diplomacy. You know how modern countries love their peace treaties, international agreements, handshakes, photo ops. Well, the Hittites were doing that over 3,000 years ago. Their Treaty of Kadesh with Egypt, signed after the famous Battle of Kadesh, is one of the earliest surviving international treaties. It was carved into stone and clay tablets, and copies were even made in both Hittite and Egyptian script. It was basically the United Nations before the United Nations existed. And let's not forget their capital, Hattusa. This wasn't some dusty hill fort, it was a planned, fortified city with monumental gates, massive walls, and sacred temples. One of the most famous gates was flanked by statues of lions, symbols of strength and protection. Walking through that city, you wouldn't just see power, you'd feel it in the stones. The Hittites mastered war, peace, and urban planning, but their name rarely gets mentioned outside academic circles. And that's a shame, because without them, the ancient world would have looked very, very different. Alright, now we venture even further east, to South Asia, where one of the world's oldest and most mysterious civilizations quietly built something extraordinary. The Indus Valley civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization, wasn't flashy. It didn't build massive statues or conquer distant lands. Instead, it focused on something that still affects us today: how to build and organize a city. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were marvels of urban planning. They didn't just grow randomly over time, they were designed from the ground up with purpose. Wide streets were laid out in a precise grid pattern, with entire neighborhoods neatly aligned. Homes were built using standardized bricks, which might sound boring, but it speaks to a level of organization and coordination most ancient civilizations couldn't even dream of. And here's the kicker: they had public drainage systems. Public drainage systems. Archaeologists have uncovered underground sewage channels, brick-lined drains, and even what appear to be early versions of toilets and showers. This was over 4,000 years ago, and these folks were already thinking about hygiene and public health. Indoor plumbing? Yeah, they were early adopters. On top of that, they weren't isolated. The Indus Valley people maintained trade networks that stretched far and wide, exchanging goods with Mesopotamia and possibly even beyond. You'll find seals, beads, and other artifacts from the Indus region scattered across ancient trade hubs. They weren't just engineers, they were global players in prehistoric commerce. But then, something changed. The civilization declined, and we're still not sure why. Many historians suspect climate change, river shifts, or perhaps even a massive drought. And here's the haunting part: we still can't read their writing. The Indus script remains undeciphered, meaning an entire civilization's thoughts, records, and stories are locked away in symbols we haven't cracked. Yet, even in silence, the Indus Valley speaks volumes about planning, innovation, and the quiet brilliance of a civilization that understood the power of structure. Now, before we wrap up our journey through the forgotten corridors of history, we need to shine a little spotlight on a few more ancient cultures that may not have had empires spanning continents, but still left behind legacies worth remembering. Let's start with the Elamites of ancient Iran. These folks were contemporaries of the Mesopotamians and were no small potatoes when it came to cultural development. The Elamites developed their own early writing systems, independent scripts that rivaled the cuneiform of their neighbors. Their political and military influence stretched across southwestern Iran, and they often clashed and traded with the great powers of Mesopotamia. While they didn't get the same mythological fame as the Babylonians or Assyrians, they were serious players in the ancient power game. Next, we have the Sogdians of Central Asia. These guys were the Silk Road's ultimate middlemen. Their cities served as major hubs connecting the East and West, and they were absolute pros at cultural exchange. Sogdian merchants didn't just sell goods, they carried stories, religions, languages, and ideas from one civilization to another. Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, even early Christianity moved through Sogdian hands. You could say they were the Wi-Fi of the ancient world, connecting everything without anyone really noticing they were there. And finally, we head across the ocean to the Americas to honor the Zapotecs of ancient Mexico. Long before the Aztecs or Mayans dominated the scene, the Zapotecs were building monumental cities like Monte Alban. They developed one of the earliest known Mesoamerican writing systems and constructed massive stone pyramids and observatories. Their influence laid the groundwork for future civilizations in the region, and their culture thrived for over 1,000 years. Each of these civilizations carved out their own place in history, writing, trading, and building their way into the global story. Yet, they often get reduced to footnotes in textbooks or overlooked entirely. But not here. Not today. So by now, you're probably wondering, if these civilizations were so advanced, so influential, and so important, how did we forget about them? Well, history isn't always fair. It's often written by the victors, and the reasons some societies vanish from memory are more about circumstance than significance. Let's start with conquests. When larger empires like Rome or Persia expanded, they didn't just take land, they erased legacies. Smaller civilizations were often absorbed, renamed, or outright destroyed. Their cities were burned, their cultures assimilated, and their histories rewritten by the new rulers. In many cases, conquerors didn't want you to remember the people they defeated, they wanted you to forget. Then there's environmental collapse. Civilizations are often tied to rivers, rain patterns, and stable climates. So when rivers dried up or shifted, or when droughts hit hard, people had to leave. Entire cities were abandoned not because of war, but because nature turned against them. And when the people left, the stories often went with them. And finally, written records, or rather, the lack of them. Without decipherable scripts or preserved documents, many of these cultures simply faded from collective memory. Take the Indus Valley civilization. They left behind seals covered in symbols, but we still can't read their script. Imagine losing your entire history just because no one cracked your alphabet. So no, they weren't forgotten because they didn't matter. They were forgotten because their stories were silenced by war, by nature, and by time. Now that we've dusted off the memories of these forgotten civilizations, what can we actually learn from them? Why does any of this still matter today? Well, first, let's talk about cultural foundations. These ancient societies laid the groundwork for so many things we take for granted: governance systems, trade networks, written language, and urban infrastructure. From the gridded streets of the Indus Valley to the diplomatic finesse of the Hittites, their contributions didn't vanish, they were just buried under the sands of more dominant empires. Second, there's the importance of historical awareness. When we look at these civilizations, we're not just studying ruins, we're exploring human resilience, adaptability, and creativity. These were people who built cities in deserts, forged empires from trade, and connected continents with ideas and goods. Their stories remind us that greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's quiet, methodical, and tragically overlooked. And finally, ongoing discovery. The exciting part is that we're still learning. Every year, archaeologists uncover new artifacts, decipher more texts, and piece together stories that were once thought lost forever. History isn't finished, it's still being written, and some of its most fascinating chapters are only just being reopened. If this journey through lost legacies sparked your curiosity, then do me a favor, hit that like button, leave a comment sharing which civilization surprised you the most, and subscribe to Truth Behind History. We've got tons more real stories, buried secrets, and historical deep dives on the way. And if you love learning the parts of history that textbooks skip, you're in the right place. Check out our other videos and keep exploring, because the stories are real, and the impact is lasting.